Between the land and the sea lies potentially one of our most biodiverse coastal habitats. Sand dunes should be incredibly dynamic ecosystems, home to amazing wildlife. But in the last century, sand dunes have become one of Europe's most threatened habitats. Without action, we risk losing these unique wild spaces and the wildlife that makes Welsh coastlines so special. This is why projects like Dynamic Dunescapes and Sands of Life are undertaking pioneering conservation work to bring the dunes back to life. Pembre, a globally important sand dune system located in southwest Wales, is one of the sites where Dynamic Dunescapes and Sands of Life are working to restore the dunes' natural processes. Sand dunes are complex ecosystems, and over time our understanding of how to manage them has changed significantly. In the past, it was believed that sand dunes needed to be stabilised, and so in the 1950s, sea buckthorn was planted at Pembre to do just that. It spread quickly across the dunes, over-stabilising the sand and altering the whole dune system. We now know that for a dune to flourish, sand needs to be able to move freely to create a mosaic of habitats, especially areas of open sand, to support an abundance of life. Over the last 15 years, conservation groups have been working to remove 37 rugby pitches worth of this invasive plant from Pembre to create a healthier dune system and enable native dune species to recover. Different methods have been used to remove the sea buckthorn. Large dense areas have been cleared by uprooting the plants and removing them from the site, and chemical treatments have also been used to kill off the scattered shrubs and prevent regrowth. Laura Bowen, Project Officer for Sands of Life, has been facilitating the removal of the last patches of sea buckthorn at Pembre.
When it comes to the scattered small young stands, then the only option we've really got is spraying it. And again, that can lead to, you don't want to be spraying other species, so you've got to be very careful, making sure the conditions are perfect, no wind and dry weather, that kind of thing. And there's quite a small window for it. You can work in spring, but the best time is autumn. So it's when the plant is dying and it takes it down into the root, and then obviously it kills it off better then. So September is the perfect time, and you've only got that little small window to work with. But yeah, if you can get that, then that's perfect. So yeah, that's what we've been doing here now for the last 2 years, is target spraying. And as you can see, it's quite a large site, so it's quite hard work to do. The more we can get rid of, obviously we'd love to get rid of 100%. It's very hard to reach that target, so as close as we can, because leaving anything will just grow back so fast. But again, it's just that controlling the growth, controlling the stabilisation, and just having that balance, so trying to create a little bit more bare sand, that little bit more mobility, just so that it can naturally, in the long term, look after itself.
Although at first it can look quite stark in the areas where sea buckthorn has been cleared, it's an exciting point for the dunes to rejuvenate. By removing the sea buckthorn, it will create areas of open and mobile sand and allow low-growing vegetation to flourish. Paul Aubrey, the site manager, has worked at Pembre for 7 years and has seen how the sea buckthorn removal has benefited wildlife.
So when we started removing the sea buckthorn about 15 years ago, the change in the habitat is immense. The areas, or compartments as we call them, are much more floristically rich. So you have a much broader range of flowers. The grass sward is much shorter, and it's a much more open habitat. Where the sea buckthorn remains, the sea buckthorn is so dense and dark that very little grows. It does take quite a few years for there to be a recovery, and that is only to be expected. But the seed source will be in the sand and in the soils, so removing it rejuvenates the soil and allows these seeds to germinate.
One of the native plant species that has benefited from the removal is the green-winged orchid. Once widespread, they are now only found in coastal dunes, where, like many dune specialists, they thrive in the naturally nutrient-poor soil. Without the buckthorn dominating the dunes, more of these beautiful native plants will be expected to thrive, and the once dense thickets of vegetation will eventually be replaced with a carpet of colourful flowers. The increased diversity of plant life in turn supports a huge number of insects. In fact, 120 different species of bees, wasps and ants have been recorded at Pembre. One of the rarest and most interesting of these is the spring mining bee. Spring mining bees are a type of solitary bee that mine into sandy banks to create burrows to lay their eggs in. Amazingly, the female bees produce a cellophane-like material which they use to line their nest cells to keep their eggs dry and protected. The warm sand allows the eggs to develop quickly and the young will hatch the following spring. Males emerge a day earlier, ready to compete for the chance to mate with newly hatched females. They'll swarm the female, forming mating balls before one of them is successful. As some areas of the dunes become more mobile and areas of bare sand become more common, we hope to see even more burrowing insects nesting in the dunes. With more insects comes more life and a healthier and more dynamic ecosystem. Dune residents like stonechat, skylark and meadow pipit, as well as migrating birds like wheatear, can all feast on the insects amongst the flowers. Clearing the sea buckthorn doesn't remove habitat for these nesting birds, it helps to create it.
The thickets of sea buckthorn are just not suitable for building nests for most birds. They're too loose in a lot of places, and there are much better habitats on the periphery for the types of birds that occur at Pembre. For example, stonechats, which are quite common on the reserve, nest on the ground, as do skylarks. They nest on the ground, and they don't need thickets of sea buckthorn to survive.
In fact, skylarks will only nest in areas with low-growing vegetation. By creating more suitable nesting habitat, it will benefit these ground nesting species and allow their iconic songs to continue to be the soundtrack of the dunes. The removal of sea buckthorn is an important step in boosting biodiversity and aiding the dunes' recovery, but it doesn't end there. It's essential to make sure that the dunes don't become overgrown again, and so the site will be monitored to see how it recovers. Conservationists are also working to increase the rabbit population at Pembre, so that they can graze the vegetation and maintain the optimal conditions for dune plants and animals. The conservation work being done isn't just for wildlife, it's also for people. It will create a healthier dune system which helps to better protect our coastal communities from storms and flooding, provide more open spaces to walk and enjoy, as well as supporting pollinator populations that are vital for our survival. The decline in biodiversity is a tragically common story across the UK, and so it's more important than ever to protect the wild spaces we have left. The recovery of wildlife at Pembre shows what can be achieved when we take action to protect what's important. The future of our dunes is looking brighter, but we must keep working to protect these unique habitats for both people and wildlife.